Hello and welcome to today's video on REBT. My name is Elian Gomez and I'm going to present you a little description of what is REBT. So, the name comes from Rational Emotive Behavioral Therapy, and here I have a little presentation for you. So we're going to go through the origin with Albert Ellis as a main proponent of this theory. Then we'll talk about basic concepts of rational emotive behavioral therapy. Then we'll work on the therapeutic techniques to understand how they work in a session. The role of the therapist, of course, or counselor. And we're going to talk about the difference between cognitive therapy and REBT, because many people get confused. And there is a big overlap, but at the same time, they are different and they come from different origins. So we're going to see those two elements. And then, of course, applications of REBT and what kind of disorders or mental health problems could help. And some of the limitations, because no theory is perfect, neither this one. So the origin is very interesting. We have Albert Ellis, who was practicing psychoanalysis for some years. He was born in 1913. He started working with psychoanalysis when it was a very important theory. And slowly he started becoming a little bit disillusionated. He thought this theory is not really what I'm feeling that has enough ways to help a person, because many times you're just interpreting people's lives and going back into their childhood and sometimes creating more problems than solutions. So he thought, let's integrate a humanistic and a behavioral approach, because behaviorism was growing. Many people were following a behavioral approach, thinking like we have to be more evidence-based, and psychoanalysis has not a lot of evidence on the way that they treat the patients or work with their techniques. So he started with this name, rational therapy, in the 50s. He thought we have to start by using our reasoning abilities and try to change our behavior through reasoning, not just consider that behavior can be changed on its own or by conditioning, by reinforcements like behaviorism was thinking, but use our cognitive abilities, considering it a rational therapy. Then in the 70s, he thought there's one more element that is missing, and it's an emotional element. So he integrated that into his theory and called it rational emotive therapy. And finally, in the 90s, he integrated the element that, he started already thinking that you can change your behavior, but if this word is in the title, then you get the whole conceptualization of what is going on in therapy. So rational emotive behavioral therapy is the way that he just started calling it in the 90s. So as you can see, it's kind of a newer theory. However, it has a long history. And it's based on this idea of changing the irrational beliefs to become more rational in the way that you think about yourself, about the environment, about the events, adverse events that you live. And it has a therapeutic model that also started growing. At the beginning, it was just called ABC. A is the activating event or the adversity. So let's say that someone just got divorced, and this is the activating event. Of course, it has been maybe happening for a while that the relationship is starting to dilute. Maybe people are not really liking each other, but the problem is the beliefs behind these difficulties in the relationship. It could be that, let's say, the female partner start thinking like it's all because she's not good enough, she's not a good mother, she's not a good wife, she doesn't try hard enough, and that's why the husband wants to get divorced. And it could be that maybe also he found a lover, so she thinks she's not beautiful enough, she's just not enough. All these could be or are, according to REBT, and we can see it probably true, that these are very irrational beliefs, are biases in her belief system. And they have emotional consequences. One thing is a divorce, but the other part is the individual consequences of feeling always with low self-esteem, maybe with a tendency to depression and feeling that she's not good enough for finding another relationship, perhaps, etc. So a lot of emotional consequences. And in that moment is the perfect moment to go to therapy or go with a counselor and find out how to dispute those those irrational beliefs. And in that sense, you have to work a lot with the client. So it's, even though it comes from humanism, it's a very therapeutic center or a facilitator center approach, because the therapist is the one deciding how to change, what to dispute, what are the irrational beliefs, and what are the effective rational beliefs that you can replace them with. So this process goes all the way to E as the effective new beliefs that will replace B, the irrational beliefs. And in that way, you'll help the client to feel better. And if you think about the example that I was explaining before about the woman that just got divorced, you help her dispute all these ideas that she's not good enough. And then you start saying like, well, you could work on thinking like, I am very valuable. My ideas are worth a lot. And maybe our relationship didn't work, but that doesn't mean that I can never have another relationship. That doesn't mean that it was all my fault. So changing these irrational beliefs will also change the emotional consequences, and the person will start gaining back her self-esteem and feeling less depressed, wanting to maybe start over in another relationship later on, wanting to like assume responsibility of the possibility of change. So there's a lot of very healthy and positive consequences of disputing these irrational beliefs. And these are kind of part of the basic concepts, how the negative events, if they are seen from an irrational perspective or with irrational beliefs, then that will lead to unhealthy negative emotions. And if you try to be very rational about what happened, because you could have a negative event in your life, I mean, we're not going to get rid of them. It's just that we're going to see them in a way that it will be helpful instead of being detrimental to our health, mental health. It will be a way to learn perhaps about ourselves, or just have a very neutral perspective and then have healthy negative emotions, because it's okay to maybe be angry or upset about the divorce, but knowing that it's not all our fault. It's not the end of the world. It's not that we are not good enough. So that's also very important to consider that there's some healthy negative emotions, according to REBT. Some rational emotive behavioral techniques that are used in therapy are homeworks. So the idea is that the client are asked to complete homework assignments. So from one session to the other, the therapist will give them some homeworks on how to change and how to use this new belief system to interact with maybe the rest of the family or herself, and keep track of the ABC connections. So how, if she has again some irrational beliefs, that will lead to negative emotions that are usually unhealthy. Other emotive techniques that are used are role playing, and this is usually seen more in group sessions. And they also they also have emotive imagery and laughter as techniques for trying to deal with irrational thoughts that is sometimes too irrational, but you're so considering that this is real that it's difficult for you to get rid of it. So with laughter, it might be able to see how maybe it's not really true, and laugh about yourself and change your perspective. And behavioral techniques like relaxation exercises, distraction, and rewards. And these are all techniques that they would use. There are some overlaps between cognitive therapy and rational motor behavioral therapy, but there are also some differences. So, I mean, both of them consider that reasoning or the thought pattern will lead into changes or influence behavior and emotion. However, REBT is more directive, so it's highly directive. The therapist really tries to persuade the person to change their behavior and their thought, so that that will change their emotions and behavior. And they are confronting a lot of times the clients, and the counselor is the teacher, so he knows what is a rational belief in this situation. He tell you as a client. And in the cognitive therapy, it's a little more open-ended questions, more flexible in terms of like, it's not imposing, they're not telling you what to think, more like reflective, so that you think together. It's more of a collaboration, and there's some structure, and it's helpful. And I would say that this is a little bit, yeah, you could think that REBT is also helpful. It's not that it's not helpful, it's just that it has a different approach. And if you think about the illnesses that REBT could help with, well, there are many, and they have tried using it with depression, and rational motor behavioral therapy works, because a lot of times some of the people that are depressed have very negative and irrational beliefs. So if you can change them, that could start helping them. Also for anxiety, there's a lot of biases. Psychosis is a little more complicated, but you can change some of the flat affect and elements that are not within the psychotic realm of hallucinations and delusions, but at least within the thought processes behind this disorder. Bipolar as well. I mean, for all these four disorders, you would need to work together with a psychiatrist to have medications, but you could always do the REBT to help them with their thinking or rational process of information. And of course, anger management, that's really good, because many people get angry because they have irrational beliefs of how things should be. Stress management can also decrease stress if you manage the way that you think about anything. And any problem with children, since some children are a bit irrational, and you could think about them as still being developing their brain. So the prefrontal cortex still needs to develop better, so that they can control their impulses, but through REBT can start helping them. And other types of problems with relationships, love, sex, even couples and marriages and counseling, family counseling, sorry, could be used using REBT. And you can also prevent dysfunctions through learning REBT, which is a preventative way. There's, of course, some limitations. So, as I said before, part of it is how the leader is imposing the values. I mean, it's not always imposing, but in general, that's the tendency, so that's a limitation. And also, if you're working in a group, it could be that you feel some pressure from the group to change your beliefs, and you might not agree with them, so that's part of the problem. And you sometimes need to adopt the goals that the therapist is selling or telling you to have. And in that sense, in other therapies or frameworks, let you kind of determine your own framework, and in that sense, you'll be able to be more in control. So that's something that it's a limitation from REBT. And sometimes, I mean, the therapist could also be biased, and he has to be aware of the motivations, bias, and altruism. And sometimes that's difficult for therapists to do. And the dependency. So you don't want any dependency on the counselor, but it could happen if it's not well managed. Okay, so this is an overview, a short overview about REBT. Hopefully it's very useful for you, and I wish you all the best in the end. Bye.